as a leader, be very intentional about defining your revenue and your sales culture. You do not need to be the smartest person in the room. Low ego is not the same thing as low performance. As a manager, as a leader, you need to hire people that are smarter than you, at least in some capacity. You need to celebrate big wins together as a team. The best salespeople in an organization should make more money than the CEO. Whatever you do, try to be in a revenue generating function.
Welcome, everyone, all the people, to People Show. And I'm so glad to see you again. My name is Ruby, and I'm the host of People. For those of you who are new to this show, People 2032 is a series about the future of work, future of HR, talents, and culture. The show is actually co-produced by VIETSUCCESS and Curious. And VIETSUCCESS is one of the leading media companies for Vietnam for high quality edutainment content and for business and professionals in Vietnam. And then for Curious, we are a new social network for on-the-job learning and development. Just a quick tip, we are launching a beta version this week for an exclusive community of high quality professionals. And I believe all of you here are very high quality professionals. So that means you go to curious.com and the reward for signing up is $1 million. Nah, I'm kidding. I don't have that. The reward is your successful and satisfying career and a lot of love from me as a bonus. So back to today's episode and topic. I'm very excited to introduce to you one of my best friends in both my life and career. It's Daisy Hoang. And I've known her for many years, and her career in sales is such an inspiration for me. Currently, she's the Senior Vice President of Sales and Success at Katalon, a global SaaS provider in automation testing software. She manages a global go-to-market team of about 100 people selling to global companies, and her team is spread around the world, including Vietnam and US and some other countries. For me, in the last few years, whenever I have sales problem, I always go and seek advice from Daisy. And every time she talk about sales, I find myself turning into a fangirl. And she's like Lady Gaga in this matter. So, when you know a Lady Gaga, right, you don't ask her to sing for yourself. You throw a concert and ask people to come and see her sing. So that's why today I'm throwing this concert for us, for people, for you here, to come and hear what Daisy has to say about building a great sales team, a great sales culture. Without further ado, Lady Daisy, are you ready? You look like you've been ready for 50 minutes already. Yes. So I'm going to pass the stage to you. So everyone, I know you can't clap on the webinar, but you can send clapping emoji in the chat to welcome Daisy. Here we go.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining this session today. I'm very happy to talk to you about a topic that I'm very passionate about, which is building a low ego and collaborative revenue culture. So before we get started, I would love just to talk about, in general, we don't talk about sales as much anymore, but rather all terms that we'll be using moving forward will be revenue, because SaaS is above just sales, right? It's also renewals, expansions, etc. So with that, just a little bit of information about me. I am, as Ruby has mentioned, I am the SVP of Sales and Success at Katalon. I am a true SaaS expert and fanatic. There is very few things that fascinates me more than a SaaS revenue model. And the reason for it is because everything compounds. And then just a fun fact about me is I am mother of a puck, and I'm a novice poker player as well. And I think Ruby can testify to that. So with that, let's just start with the first question. why do so many revenue cultures turn toxic as of now? And why is it such a big topic as of now? So with that, let's start with a few areas of what we have known about revenue and sales culture so far. Number one is that it's a very quota-driven and a numbers game, right? So you have seen many sales reps, many sales managers that are pursuing and getting pressure from pursuing a lot of the times, ambitious sales quota. It also starts with the top. So a lot of the time you have head of sales, you have head of revenue that is also very stressed out about hitting revenue projection as well. And all of this stress can actually triggers down to the team members. You'll see that there's a lot of competition that typically happens in sales. And naturally, some of that competition cannot be as healthy as possible. And then overall is in some cultures that we have seen, we prioritize performance over culture. So to be honest, in sales team, we rarely kind of highlight the actual culture piece, but rather how do we make sure that we hit the number, we deliver the revenue forecast, etc. So with that, sales is a very tough environment, right? So what we're seeing here, the stats that I'm sharing with you is actually 1 in 4 on the stat is anticipating to leave sales in the next 6 months. So it's not a long-term career in many choices. In many cases, 1 in 4 is also looking to just work in sales only for the next 36 months. So if you're looking at, let's say, other traditional professions like doctors, like professors, etc., it's very different to see that kind of long-term mindset, in particular, when it comes to sales and revenue. And because of that, naturally, we have a lot of issues with retention. We have a lot of issues with maintaining the right culture within sales as well. So with this, one thing that I wanted to highlight is throughout this whole conversation, I'm going to share with you multiple takeaways. I hope that if you don't have to remember much, but just remember the takeaways that I have put here. The very first thing that I have, which is the first takeaway, is you have to be intentional about defining your revenue and your sales culture. The reality with culture is that you're going to have one anyway. Right. So if you have multiple people sitting in the same room, naturally, there will be an organic culture that will happen, comes from all of these people. So you might as well, as a leader, be very intentional about how you wanted to shape this culture. So with that, the only way for you to start kind of defining what you would like to grow your sales culture is to understand the makeups of salespeople. So not everybody can be a salesperson. It takes a very different type of character and personality in order to have the right mindset. So with that, I just have one exercise for everybody that's sitting on this call today. I'd like you to type in the chat one word that comes to mind when you're thinking of a salesperson, in your opinion.
This is going to be fun.
Okay, I heard courage. Okay, I heard aggressive, acute, interested in people, extroverted, caring. Oh, that's the first one I've heard, caring. Okay, friendly, outgoing, fun. Okay. Okay, so who just wrote talk here? That's funny. Okay, so in general,
sound like you, Daisy.
We're perceived as talkative, very persistent, very resilient. Okay, very good point so far, guys. So in general, I think there's a lot of resiliency, there's a lot of persistence, a lot of kind of people friendly mindset in this. All of this is great. So with that, one thing that I wanted to share with everybody today is, in general, there's a zillion people that are in sales as of today. But averagely, when we're looking at statistics, we put them in 5 different buckets. And what we call, those are the 5 traits of salespeople. So let's start with the first one. The first type of sales profile is what we call relationship builder. So a relationship builder is somebody that really believes in building strong customer advocates, is generous in giving time to others, and they get along with everyone. You'll find this very familiar because many salespeople are actually this type of person. So this is one. The other one is a problem solver. So a problem solver is somebody that you can always count on for responding to you, for ensuring that all of the problems are being resolved, right, by emails, by all kinds of medium. And then they tend to be very detailed oriented, right? They make sure that they are good at program management and they follow up with inquiries, etc. The third one is a hard worker. So a hard worker type of sales profile is, they always go the extra mile. They are very self-motivated, and they're very interested in feedback and development. And if you're thinking about sales, back in the old days of kind of, door knocking, you'll see that this type of person is extremely prevalent. The next one that we have is a very particular one, which is a lone wolf type of sales profile. So if you can imagine a lone wolf in your head, they tend to follow their own instincts, right? They are very self-assured. They know and they believe in their own heart what they need to do. And because of that, they're extremely independent by nature. And the last type of sales profile is what we call a challenger. So a challenger is somebody who always have a different view of the world. They understand the customer's business, right? They love to debate. They believe in healthy friction and healthy tension. And then they will always push the customers in order to go into the right direction and push them to think outside the box. So in general, and this is a model that we follow as part of a challenger sale. So it's a very popular model as part of sales management, but we're seeing these 5 as a typical 5 types of sales profiles. So with that, I have 2 questions for you. First off, statistically, which sales profile is the lowest performing profile? I want you to type in the chat. Okay, so lots of questions around lone wolf here. Okay, interesting. There's a hard worker. Okay, so hard worker tends to also, in your opinion, not rank very well. Great. Relationship builder. I'm talking about lowest performing, guys. Wait, did I ask about highest performing? Yeah, lowest performing. So a profile that doesn't perform as well as others. Okay, great. Lone wolf. Okay, so it seems like we have a consensus here. Actually, the answer for this is a relationship builder. So this is very interesting because the relationship builder is at this time contribute to roughly half of a typical sales profile that we have seen. In fact, 43% of salespeople tend to be relationship builders, but they have the lowest proportion of what we call star performers. So only at 7% of star performers are relationship builders. When I first looked at this stat, I was shocked by that actually. But relationship builder tends to not affect the same level in the outcomes. All right, great. Moving on to the next one, vice versa. Which sales profile is the highest performing one? We're looking at problem solver, hard worker, lone wolf, relationship, and challenger sale. Okay, I saw challenger. Okay, I see problem solver. The opposite of relationship builder. So what is that? A lone wolf? Yeah, an offset lone wolf. Okay, understood. Challenger. Okay. You guys are actually very accurate. So the sales profile that's the highest performing one is actually the challenger sales. So when we're looking at all of the sales profiles, the one profile that dramatically exceeds others in likelihood to achieve what we call the star performance status is a challenger. In fact, nearly 40% of star performers were actually challengers. The key thing for me to highlight here is when in complex sales situations, meaning in complex enterprise, multi-stakeholders, multi-decision-making process, that number within challenger sales rose to 54%. So Overall, they are very, very high performing. Now, another fun fact for you guys is the second best performing sales profile is actually a lone wolf profile, because they tend to be very self-assured and they are go-getters. So with this, the reason I'm highlighting all of this for you is in Vietnam in particular, right? I'm not talking about global. In Vietnam right now, the most predominant sales profile that we have seen so far, it's either a relationship builder or a hard worker, right? Those are the two. And actually, these two as a combination do not produce as much results as possible. So in Vietnam, for example, when we're looking at sales, we realize that people tend to rely a lot on relationship, rely a lot on referrals, and rely a lot on word of mouth. And then that is a huge momentum in sales and in revenue now, where we're trying to move away from what we call people-oriented to a process-oriented type of sales. So great question so far. So now that we understand what is the makeup of our salespeople, the takeaway number 2 that I'll have for you guys is that revenue in general, in order to drive the number, tend to naturally reward what we call a lone wolf behaviors and then team competition. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because as part of resolving what we call a conflict-prone environment, you have to be very intentional about it. So what is Katalon's answer? Katalon answers, we believe that there's 2 ways for us to resolve these kind of conflict-prone environment. Number 1 is low ego, right? We make sure that we recruit, we train, we retain low ego individuals. One thing that we have to be sure is that low ego is not the same thing as low performance, right? There's a lot of high performance with low ego. Number 2 is collaboration. And in fact, over collaboration in some sense. You've heard Ruby talks about Katalon being super global and stressed out across multiple countries. The only way for us to succeed is to make sure that the team talks to each other and collaborate. As a manager, as a leader, you need to hire people that are smarter than you, at least in some capacity. A person can be very successful in sales is the ability to do what we call deep discovery. Revenue in general and sales in particular is a team sport. So with that, let's start with the first part, which is how do we build a low ego culture? So with that, let me look at potentially why is high ego dangerous in sales. So right now, the most conception, or I guess misconception that I've seen is that you must be overconfident and arrogant to be successful in sales. And you guys are also thinking the same thing, because when I asked you, what's your perception of a salesperson, you share with me all of this. All right. So with that, I wanted you to also type in the chat why inflated egos can be dangerous in sales. Why do you think that something like this can be potentially dangerous? It's hard to sympathize. Okay, so lack of empathy. Very good. They tend to be selfish. Exactly. A lot of the time, salespeople can be very self-serving. Great attendance so far, guys. Keep them coming. Narrow-minded. Okay, great. They cannot build a team. Great. So a lot of team leadership and team management in this. They tend to be defensive. Okay. Understood. Really, really good point. Might ignore the customer's need. Okay, Tracy, you hit it on the head. So with that, I'm going to use what Tracy just mentioned. Is there's really 2 ways that I'm seeing that inflated egos can be dangerous. First is externally to customers, right? First off, inflated egos tend to get you into a situation where you think that you know more than the customers about their own situation, right? And one key thing that tells us that a person can be very successful in sales is the ability to do what we call deep discovery, right? By saying that you know more than the customer in their own situation prevents you from doing and conducting deep discovery. You're not attempting to listen. Somebody just said about empathetic, which is very good. And then to internal teams, there's many reasons on why high ego can be potentially dangerous. First off, high egos tend to be correlated with low coachability, right? It's very hard to coach someone who believes that they know everything and that they are the best one in the room. They tend to blame others when things go wrong in a scenario that they do go wrong, and they resist tasks. And I've heard this many times in the past where they're using the statement of they aren't my job. And this is particularly dangerous in a startup environment. And then with that, lone wolf, and then also additional high ego team members, they tend to play by their own rules, in which can lead to unethical and then also self-serving decisions, right? So there's many reasons on why we want to be particular about not having individuals that with inflated egos. So the takeaway number 3 is to look for humility when hiring. And how do you actually look for humility when hiring? First off, hiring is a very tough job. You can interview 1,000 people to this date, and you still find it very tough at this time. And with that, I wanted to share with you guys a few tips. First off, you can ask questions to uncover humility during interviews, right? So interviews is an area that you can start asking already. There's 2 questions that I use all the time in my interviews. Number 1 is, whom do you owe your success to, right? So understanding who do they learn from in their career, whom you have learned a lot from in your career in order to understand what is the ability to absorb new knowledge and then find mentorship in the previous job. Another way for you to look for humility is actually not through asking questions, but to role play. So if you remember Mark, who's I think the previous CRO of HubSpot, he really believes in this. He utilized a lot of role plays in order to understand coachability. So first off, the way that he would do it is to ask candidate to provide a pitch. They will ask candidate to self-diagnose, right? So they will review the pitch and then understand what is something that they could improve on. As an interviewer, they provide real-time feedback. And then from there, they evaluate the ability of the candidate to absorb that feedback and deliver a second pitch. So just as part of interviews, you can see right away how coachable they would be and how, ability to take on feedback. So just some key tips, right? Takeaway number 4 that I would have for you guys is it's very hard for you to hire low ego people at all time. There will always be an A player, B player, C player in your team. So with this, the ability for you to not just build, but sustain the right culture is to rid of what we call toxic superstars, meaning people that are very high performers, but at the same time, they are not the right culture fit. They don't know how to get along well with colleagues. They tend to not be collaborative. So if you remember Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, he has this famous quote, and I want to share with you. He said, "Do not tolerate brilliant jerks. The cost to teamwork is too high." So the term brilliant jerks is actually a very popular term that everybody's using now, where they are very good at their job. They deliver the numbers, but at the same time, they have jerky behaviors, right? So that's somebody that you do not want to maintain in your team. So ability to put them on plan and look for opportunity to remove them. So with that, the takeaway number 5, and I think there's some leaders here that's sitting on this call, so this would be a good call out for you. Everything starts with the top. So with that, practice empathetic leadership, right? The first thing that I wanted you guys to know, and this is very important for young managers and young leaders, you do not need to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, it's very detrimental if you are the smartest person in the room. My favorite saying is, if you are the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, because there's not enough people that challenge you and then continues to provide additional feedback that you might not necessarily be aware of. All right. So with that, as a best practice, as a manager, as a leader, you need to hire people that are smarter than you, at least in some capacity. So for me right now, as part of interviewing, I need to make sure that I get out of an interview and I reflect and I ask myself the question, what is something that this person can do better than myself at this time? If the answer is nothing, there's absolutely no reason for me to hire this person, right? So really ask yourself that question. And then from there, create a horizontal organization structure that allows for what I call radical candor feedback. So leadership, you don't just live in your own kind of vacuum, right? You need to understand what the team is thinking. You need to make sure that culture also gets a chance to spread from the bottom. And with that, you need to make sure that there's an ability for feedback to travels up. So that's it. It's in terms of how to build a low ego team. There's many, many tips here, but I'll recap at the end. So the part 2 that I would have is, how do we incentivizing collaboration? So we talked about low ego and we talked about collaboration among your ref team. And by answering this, I'm going to show you this next question. So Ruby, what game is it that I'm showing you here?
Basketball.
Basketball, exactly. What is so special about basketball?
I'm not a fan of basketball. I mean, I'm not a fan, but I don't watch basketball. But I think what you was trying to say is the teamwork, right? It takes everyone work to win a game.
Exactly. What I'm trying to say by showing this picture is that you have to put people in the position that allows for their strength and their weakness to shine, right? So, for example, a football team would not succeed if everybody is a goal scorer, right? Or a American football game is not going to succeed if everybody's a quarterback, for example. So how do we make sure that there's a team that works well together by at the same time? You guys remember the 5 makeups of a sales profile. How do you make sure that when you put them in the same pot, they will work well? So with that, the next takeaway that I have as part of tactics to build collaboration include, first off, celebrate teams' wins and losses. When people sell a deal, when people close a deal, when people lose a deal, use this to your advantage and make sure that you have an ability to kind of share this publicly. Select the right collaboration tools. So there's many tools right now in the market that allows people to communicate and then also over communicate in some instances. A lot of the time in sales, you have problems that you yourself cannot solve, including sales leaders cannot solve. So the way that you would do is to crowdsource it, right? Present a solution to the sales team and ask everybody to present their own solution and think about it in a way that's creative. And then with that, play to your team's strength, right? This is the point I was trying to highlight with Ruby as well. The next takeaway, number 6, is sales team and revenue teams are very different to other teams because we're driven by what we call compensation and commission, right? So use this to your advantage. Use it as a leverage in order to incentivize the right behavior. So there's sales comp. It's very tough for you to get it right in the first time because you have to understand what your team is driven by. But in general, here are some tips for you to design the certain team-based quota and SPIFs. Number 1 is, first off, outside the individual comp and individual commission, look for opportunities to also design team-based quota and then SPIFs as well. So for example, if your entire sales team made XYZ milestone, they would be able to achieve this, for example. In some cases, you can lean on double compensation instead of splitting commission. So for example, what I mean by this is if you put 2 people in one deal, right, instead of saying, I'm going to split half and half, naturally, it creates a lot of conflict because guy A will look at guy B and says, I work more than you, or I put more efforts into this than you. Why should we get 50-50, for example? So in some cases, you would need to lean on what we call double compensation, right? You choose to compensate them equally, fully. And then with that, there's some areas that we call a conflict-prone components. So for example, if there's different routes to the market, different segments that tend to be higher in conflicts, you can look for joint pursuit opportunities where you put them both. They can both get compensated as well, and then they can both go to market together. And the last piece is look for or hold competitions, healthy competitions that would require collaboration. So for example, at Katalon, we do a demo competition where we put a salesperson along with a sales engineer person. They make one team and then they compete against other people in order to, to win a demo. So that allows you to collaborate in a very deep structure. So that's takeaway number 6. So with that, just question for you guys so that you guys don't fall asleep is, are you guys leveraging sales comp today as a way to drive the right behavior? Or have you started thinking about it? Okay, Ella is very excited. She said yes with 3S. Chami said, can you explain on number 3? Yes, so number 3 is something that you could consider. So for example, if you have a team that does enterprise, right, and you have a team that does mid-market, for example, naturally they carry different quotas and different goals, but you can look for opportunities for them to, let's say, go after a deal together, or go after a certain segment together, or go after a very dedicated core group of clients together. And then in this scenario, you choose to compensate both in those scenarios so that they are more willing and more incentivized in order to work together. Okay, Ming said our firm use number 1 mostly. Many companies use number 1 mostly. Okay, great. So collaboration, right? We talk about compensation. Number 7 is don't just communicate, actually over communicate. Especially if you're global, if you're spread out across multiple teams like we are. So number 1 is storytelling is very big in sales, extremely big in sales. What I mean by that is you need to celebrate big wins together as a team. So why did we win over this competitor? If you have a very special deal, you can ask a rep to come up. They can share it to everybody. They can kind of analyze it and share it together. Or you can review losses and lessons learned together. So try to set up a cadence, maybe weekly, maybe bi-weekly, maybe monthly, in order to adopt a storytelling mindset. Next one is to invest for communication, invest in tech stack that would empower collaboration. Here's just a few. You can look at Slack, Monday, Jira, Confluence, whatever that might be. But the goal is to make sure that the teams have a way to always transfer knowledge and transfer communication. And then potentially adopt a potential mentor and mentee program. This is very key because in sales, there's many layers of how you can move on from, a certain segment to another, or a certain geo to another. So the way for you to train and coach somebody does not necessarily have to come from a manager, but can also come from somebody that have been doing it for some time. So potential mentor and mentee program that could be helpful. Okay. So with that, I know I'm eating into my Ruby's questions time here. So the last thing that I wanted to leave you guys with is revenue in general and sales in particular is a team sport. It's a very big team selling, group selling motion. And, out of the sessions today, I have left you guys with 8 different takeaways. You don't have to take notes, but let me just quickly walk through everybody. First off, you have to be intentional about defining your sales culture. It should not be organic. You need to start right now thinking about what is the traits that you need your teams to inherit. Revenue environment naturally tends to reward lone wolf behaviors and team competition. And therefore, that's why being intentional about how to reverse this needs to be your top of mind. As a leader, as an HR person, as a sales management, you need to look for humility when hiring. And as part of retaining the team, you need to get rid of toxic superstars when the time is right. And as a leader, make sure that you need to showcase and live by example that you're an empathetic leader. And in sales, right, especially for collaboration, we understand that sales are driven by compensation. Use it to drive the right behaviors. And the last thing is don't just communicate, over communicate. And that's it. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you sent me a lot of questions within the chat and the QA. The best salespeople in an organization should make more money than the CEO. In most mature organizations, you have a middle layer between sales and product. Whatever you do, try to be in a revenue generating function.
Beautiful, Daisy. Thank you so much for the insightful and beautiful presentation. FYI, everyone, she was staying up really late last night to get this done. But she can talk about this all day, right? So she just needs to put a deck on the slides. So Daisy, I have a ton of questions for you. Some of them are from me. Some of them are from the audience. They sent to us in advance. So here we go. We're going to ask you tough questions. And I know you're going to be able to handle it because you're a challenger and I'm going to challenge you. So the first question is, why do you think within a company, the sales team or revenue team seem to be more prone to toxic culture compared to other teams like engineering or product or customer success? Why sales?
First off, I'd like to give a shout out to Katalon people because many people have told me that they're on this call. So thank you guys so much for making the time on Saturday to join us. So question from you, Ruby. You were saying that why is revenue team tend to be more prone to conflict, right?
Yeah, and toxic culture, which is something you talked about earlier.
And toxic culture. Yeah, I think that's something that I showed in the slides. There's multiple reasons. Number one is the makeups of it, the people that are within the team. We tend to be usually a lot more stronger characters. We tend to be typically a lot of go-getters, people that are hard-headed. And because of that, it's tend to naturally cause conflict. We also, another reason that you're seeing as well is comp plan is very hard to get right. In fact, many companies get wrong. In for years, even you have to make sure that comp plan is changing. And a lot of the time, salespeople in general are driven by what we call the microeconomics of their paychecks, right? So it's very natural. And that's why they're in sales to start with. So they care a lot about how deals are happening. What is it that they're making? And because of that, the way that you're setting up comp plan naturally can create also conflicts within the team. So that's why you have to be very intentional about it. And I think the third one as well, potentially is sales tend to be a very remote profession, right? You don't need to have every salesperson sitting in the same room. In many companies, you have salespeople sitting at home in their targeted home office. Everybody's responsible for their own territory, and because of that, collaboration can be tougher to achieve than, let's say, when you work with an in-house engineering team, for example.
So it seems like one of the key reasons you talk about is comp, right? A lot of sales are motivated by comp, and comp seems to be a very tough nut to crack. And I wonder why only in sales or revenue functions, companies compensate people with commission. If you think about it, to have a deal close is a work of a whole company. It comes from product, building a great product, and then marketing, bringing the leads, and then sales close the deals, and then customer success do their customer care, make sure the customer come back. There's so many people involved in making a deal. Just sales are the people who are directly involved in the deal. This is a kind of a hypothetical question. Do you think that maybe because the way we incentivize people with money that actually makes this whole culture so difficult to manage? And I've read so many literature about this, right? Money is important for sure, but beyond a certain amount, people are not motivated by it. But seems like in sales or revenue function is still the key driver. And I'm so curious about, like, what do you think about this? Is paying people with commissions still relevant, still very important? Or is there a different way to do this without having that commission-driven incentive plan?
My thinking is that, first off, sales doesn't have to be the only component within a company that has some level of what we call variable compensation, right? So when you're looking at compensation, how compensation in general is structured, there's two sides of it. Number one is a fixed component, right? It's really just your base salary. But then there's also a variable component that is, it could be a commission, it could be a performance bonus, it could be whatever that might be, but it doesn't have to be fixed every month. It changes, right? So in many companies now, they actually move the variable structure beyond just the sales team. they apply it to other components. So if you ask me about engineering and product, I can absolutely apply a variable structure to engineering. I say, at the end of your month, if you're saying that by your first sprint, there's no bugs, you're getting access to variable number one, right? So you can tie it to performance really easily. So I wouldn't say commission is money driven. Commission, in my thinking, it's really just a performance tie or a milestone tie type of a paycheck, right? So with that, as sales, we have the term that we call OTE, meaning on target earnings, right? So sales actually don't live just on base salary. Base salary usually for sales tend to be more conservative than other roles, right? But they're on target, meaning the amount of paycheck that they would be able to receive once they meet a certain target is something that will be comparable. And then also in some way, even higher in some professions. The reason why in sales you want to use commission is because commission, the best companies choose not to have capped commission, meaning you can always go above your target and you can always go above what we would call on target variable, right? So this is talking about how do you use comp to design the right behavior. Basically, you use it to design for people to go and achieve what they were meant to achieve. So even in some companies, they actually get what we call an accelerator, meaning they get X dollars by 100%. But the moment they surpass that 100%, right, every dollar they make afterwards, they would be at 1.2x, right, or 1.3x, for example. So it actually pushes them to meet and achieve their target. So to me, the way that I look at comp is not a negative type of structure at all, but rather it's a way to design and influence the right behaviors.
That's awesome. So talking about designing that structure, we know it's very hard, right? Let's talk about a bad incentive scheme look like, how it look like. Mm-hmm. So do you have any red flags for people here when they design an incentive scheme or when they propose an incentive scheme, right? They should look for those areas of potential red flags and remove it out of the scheme?
Yeah, great question. You should have sent me this question because then I can prepare. but
I know you can deal with this on the spot.
I'm just kidding. So there's many red flags, or there's many what we call things that you should avoid as part of designing comp plan. First off, you should never cap a commission plan, right? In fact, my favorite motto is that the best salespeople in an organization should make more money than the CEO, right? So in some companies, especially traditional companies, they cap at 100%, right? The moment they meet target, they don't have the ability to earn more. So with that, I've interviewed many people in the past who actually choose to leave a company because their commission is capped. So I think that's number one, never cap it. And number two is if you do have the ability to consider apply what we call accelerators, right? So accelerator is basically you pay more when something happens. So you use accelerators in scenarios that you need a little bit of push. So for example, it could be accelerators when they meet 100% of the plan, because you don't want salespeople to slow down, right? When they meet 100%, there's a behavior in sales that we call our sandbagging, meaning they meet 100% in their quarter. So they were like, okay, I'm done with the quarter now. I'm not going to wait to close this deal next quarter. Then it would help me. So that behavior is something that we don't want to have in the company. So the way that you actually offset that behavior is to pay more when they meet the quota, right? So that could be one way. Number two, it could be, let's say if you have a new product that you wanted to sell into the market and you wanted to roll out, and you want your sales team members to actually focus more of their attention and their knowledge and train themselves on how to sell the new product, then you can apply an accelerator on that product as well. Meaning, hey, you get 1x for old products, but you're going to get 1.2x for new products, for example. Another way that you can use accelerator is, let's say if you have a core targeted group of clients that you wanted to achieve. Let's just say in Vietnam, I want to get into VNG and FPT. for example, the way that I would do it is to say, hey, any opportunity that's coming from any teams within these two companies, I am paying an accelerator, right? You will get an accelerator. So that allows the team to say, okay, I have 100 accounts to focus on, but naturally, I'm going to prioritize these two accounts. So I think that would be the second piece, right? Use accelerators, right? I think the third red flag, or the third thing to avoid as well, is there was something that I highlighted in the deck, is you have to be very transparent about comp. Comp is something that's very sensitive. Salespeople care a lot about what they're making. So the way that you have to over communicate in comp as well. So I think some of my RevOps team members on this call, they are very transparent in terms of how comp's being done, right? We design a tracker, we design a real-time dashboard so that salespeople can always track in real time what is the level of compensation that they can make at any time. So I think there's many things that we can touch on as well, but it's really an art as part of running a sales team.
True that. It's actually an art. It's not just science. There's no formula to do this right. Now, next, I would like to hear from Ella. She has a really cool questions, and I think this question is related to all of us here. We have faced this challenge before. So let's bring Ella to the panel and hear from her.
Thanks, Ruby, and thank Daisy for the amazing morning with a lot of insights and learning. Yeah, so my question is quite simple because that's what we have to deal with every day as the early stage startup when we don't have a perfect product yet. Like product is always under development while the sales team have to be always being out there and selling an underdeveloped product, right? So for me, it's one thing to optimize the performance of the sales team. It's another thing to make sure that the sales team and the product team, in our case, the engineering team, is working well together. And so far, I think we managed to do okay, but so often there's a lot of delay in sales team. Is can I wait for the next version to be released so that I can sell better? That kind of thing. So Daisy, do you have any tips or framework on how to optimize the collaboration between sales team and product team so that product will also be delivered on time while sales target are met?
Well, Ella, that's a CEO question. It's a very
that's definitely a CEO question.
Let's hear from Daisy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ella, for the question. I think it's a great question. I do think in general, at the early stage where you're yet to find product market fit for certain products, or you're working with a beta or still developing type of products, the best way for you to deal with it is to actually involve your CEO or your founder into the sales process, right? So early stage, the best salespeople is actually your management team, your CEO. So the one that's selling curious, the best at this time is nobody except Ruby. Ruby can hire 10 people in the sales team, but they would not be doing as much of a good job as she will be doing, right? So I think it depends on the maturity of the product, but if the product is not that mature yet, you haven't really found product market fit, is really when you pull in your CEO. And the reason I'm saying that is because CEO in a way can help you accelerate market feedback back to the product. The reality when you involve a sales team is that sales can only have so much influence over the product. You can have, weekly stand-up meeting, you can have daily feedback meeting, whatever that might be, but they're also driven by their own sprints. And the only person that will have that type of influence is likely the founder or CEO. So I think first off, make sure that leadership is involved in these conversations. Second off is, in general, I think there has to be a middle layer outside just sales and product, because sometimes it depends on how technical the product is, right? For Katalon, we're a very, very technical product, but let's say it might not be the same thing if you're selling Zoom or Slack. In most mature organizations, you have a middle layer between sales and product who understands business market feedback, but who also technical enough to see if it makes sense for the product, right? So it could be, for us, it could be our sales engineers. So our sales engineers could be joining the sessions with sales, right? They are the first layer of really filtering the feedback from customers, and then from there, sending it back to product, right? And helps product prioritize, because you cannot really develop 10 features out of the 10 features that customers request. You have to prioritize. So I think that's number 2. And number 3 is, as a product company, right? You will have to be very clear and very transparent to customers that you're not a custom shop, meaning you're not here to input as many features that they request as possible into your product, right? So the key way that you have, as part of going to a larger community, serving a large number of clients, is to say, my VP of product or my CEO will have ultimate control over the product roadmap. And then from there, they will review and consolidate all feedback from the customers in order to input whatever it is in the roadmap. Because soon you will get into a situation, maybe Series A, Series B, you'll get into a situation where you're talking to your enterprise clients and they have so much control over your roadmap, which is something that you never want to happen, right? Because at that time, you're no longer a true product company. You're at that time an outsourced company for an enterprise client. So those, Ella, would be my 3 main feedback to your questions. I hope that's helpful.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Daisy. And by the way, Ella is also the co-founder and COO at a startup company called Falcon Augmatics. And just beside a few points that Daisy just shared, I'm also a founder and a CEO of a startup, and I feel you. Product is so underdeveloped, right? And sometimes if we find it really hard to deliver the product in time and in the quality that we or the customer wants, the story between product and sales collab here might be a tough one. And Daisy mentioned about this, having that transparency with the customers and the team that the product is underdeveloped, right? However, the core products, even though it's underdeveloped, is already solving that problem. And that's why we're building MVP and the iteration of MVP, right? We should tell them in advance with the salespeople and the customer that the product is not perfect. And that's why they are getting it at a discount or at a very low price, and they get the CEO, the COO here, or the co-founders here being in the conversation to listen to their problem and help them build the solution they want. So I think there's a lot of expectation management here across sales and product and also customers. If I were in the position, which I will be soon, I'll do that.
And I think we talked about Complan today, the whole pricing, how to price your product right is a whole another topic. And I think
I don't want to open that can of worms.
But the key thing that I would say here as part, because you spoke about providing discounts to early adopters. In general, we at sales, right, in order for you to have a sustainable revenue model in years to come, is to not over leverage the discount, right? I've seen companies who do giving 100% discount in the first year for early adopters and then 50% after. It's very detrimental, because the moment the discount level drops, client churns, especially if your product is still not mature at that time. So how do you kind of price your product and provide an incentive for clients to adopt at that stage is extremely tough.
Good point.
But anyway, maybe that's a next topic for you.
Yeah, maybe next time we come back to hear Daisy, we'll hear about pricing. It's a whole other kind of worms to handle. Now, I just have one last question for you. So let's say I hire an advertising company and I put up a billboard all around the world for you to send one message to all the revenue talents out there in the world. What would you put on that billboard? Just one message.
I think I wrote about this in my message, is that whatever you do, try to be in a revenue generating function. You can be in other functions. Don't get me wrong. You can be in product. You can be in engineering. You can be in support. You can be in HR. But the question that you should always consider is, what is the impact that my role has when it comes to revenue, right? So in engineering, it could be, okay, how is the sprint helping us to get more customers, get customers to pay more, get customers to achieve more, right? Or if I'm in an HR position, how would this role allow us to grow maybe 200% year-over-year growth instead of 100% year-over-year growth? And the reason for it is there's a lot of companies when you're seeing that functions are seeing themselves more than, as a cost center, more than as a revenue center. And it's actually very detrimental because it's like a yin and yang, right? Like some components only bring in money, but some components always burn money. So the key way for you to validate your profession and your career at all times is to really understand, how is it that I personally, in my function, affecting the lifeblood of the business? Because you can never predict. I mean, we're going through a very big change in our economics globally today. Revenue is going to be more important and going to be assessed more than ever. So I think you always have to validate that type of conversation. Whatever you do, try to be in a revenue generating mindset.
That's beautiful. That's perfect to end the talk today. And before we go, everybody, I would love to tell you a little bit about next episode. We're going to talk about how to hire superstars. And this is high-performing, amazing superstars, not the type of superstars that is toxic that Daisy talked about earlier, right? So, and the one who talked about hiring superstars is a superstar. And his name is Brian Pels. He's the former co-founder of VNG, and he has founded, I think, 1 billion companies with unicorn, with IPO, with multiple exits. And he hired the best in the world. So come back to us next week to listen about this topic. And I would love to hear your feedback about People series. We are now at episode number 3. We're still new, we're still learning. My team and I would love to hear what you have to say about this series. So email me to ruby@curious.com. Or actually, we're going to send you a feedback form as well after the episode today. And finally, stay tuned to all the updates on People. There's so many exciting content coming up. Thank you, Daisy. Thank you so much for such a beautiful talk today. In more than an hour, I've learned more than 10 years of experience in sales. And it's going to help me correct so many mistakes I've made in the past and move forward with a much better mindset to think about sales. And I hope everyone here is going to take away a lot and apply a lot. I really love it. We really appreciate you, Daisy. You're a superstar. And everyone else on here, remember to also give Curious a try. And that's it. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoying Trung Thu. See you.
Yes, enjoying Trung Thu. Everyone is enjoying Trung Thu.